The wind screamed across the snowy hills, shaking trees and rattling the windows of the old pickup truck. The sky was dark and snow fell so thick, it looked like a white wall moving in front of the headlights. David, a tall man with a tired face, gripped the steering wheel tightly. His 9-year-old son, Jamie, sat next to him, hugging a warm blanket. "Dad," Jamie whispered, "are we going to make it home before dark?" David glanced at the boy and gave a small nod. "If this storm lets us, we will. Just hold on." They were returning from the nearest town, which was 2 hours away. David had picked up medicine and food. They lived alone in a wooden cabin deep in the forest. Jamie's mom had passed away 2 winters ago. Since then, it was just the two of them. Suddenly, Jamie sat up. His eyes widened. "Did you hear that?" he asked. David frowned. "Hear what?" I heard someone crying." David slowed the truck. The wind howled louder, but then, there it was. A soft, weak sound. It wasn't the wind. It was a cry, like a baby, but different. David stopped the truck and opened the door. Freezing wind rushed in, stinging their faces. "Stay in the truck," he said. Jamie nodded, but his eyes followed every move his father made. David stepped out, pulled up his collar, and listened carefully. The crying sound came again. He followed it, his boots sinking into thick snow. After a few steps, his flashlight caught something strange. Silver metal sticking out of the snowbank. It looked like a pod, smashed and broken, half buried in the snow. Then he saw her. A woman. Not human. Her skin was pale blue, her eyes closed, and her body trembling. She wore strange clothes, torn and covered in ice. In her arms she held a small child, also not human. The child's skin was purple and her tiny fingers were frozen stiff. "Dad, over here," Jamie shouted, running toward him with a blanket. "I told you to stay." David stopped. There was no time for scolding. He quickly knelt beside the woman and child. The woman opened her eyes for a second. Her lips moved slowly. "Please, help her," she whispered. Then she fainted. Jamie's voice cracked. "Dad, her child is freezing." David didn't speak. He wrapped the child in Jamie's blanket and picked both aliens up in his arms. "Back to the truck now." Jamie ran ahead, opened the door wide, and pushed things aside. David placed the woman and her child inside, covering them with all the extra jackets and blankets he could find. He turned the heater to full and checked their breathing. "They're still alive," he said, "but barely." Jamie looked at the child's face. "She's so small, like my little cousin." David started the truck and turned it around. "We're taking them home," he said firmly. 20 minutes later, they reached the cabin. David carried the alien woman in his arms while Jamie followed with the child. Inside, the fire was quickly lit, and the room filled with warmth. David carefully laid them on the couch and added more blankets. Jamie placed a warm water bottle near the child's feet and kept looking at her face. "Will they be okay, Dad?" "I don't know, son. I really don't." Then, slowly, the alien woman moved her hand and opened her eyes. She looked weak but awake. "You, human?" she whispered. David nodded. "Yes, you're safe now." She looked at her child, then at Jamie. "You saved her." David leaned forward. "What's your name?" "Zari," she said. "My daughter, Luma." Jamie smiled. "Hi, Luma." The child blinked. She was awake. Zari began to cry softly. Her tears sparkled like silver in the firelight. "Thank you. I thought we were going to die." David looked at her closely. She was scared and freezing, but she was a mother, just like any mother on any world. "You're safe here," he said again. "But who were you running from?" Zari's face darkened. She looked at the window toward the snowy forest. "They're still out there," she whispered. "They want my daughter. They will not stop." Jamie grabbed his father's hand. "Dad, we have to protect them." David stared at the flames. Outside, the storm was still howling, but inside something stronger had begun to burn. Hope. The fire cracked inside the small wooden cabin. Orange light danced across the walls. Snow tapped gently against the windows, but the storm outside had softened. Inside, warmth slowly returned to the frozen air. Zari sat on the couch, wrapped in thick blankets. Her daughter Luma lay beside her, asleep but breathing steady now. Jamie, the human boy, sat cross-legged on the floor drawing pictures with colored pencils. He would peek at Luma every few minutes as if making sure she was still there. David stood near the window, holding a mug of hot tea. He watched the trees sway in the cold wind, his eyes alert. He had lit 2 lanterns and placed one on the shelf beside the couch. "Where are you from?" Jamie asked softly, looking up at Zari. Zari blinked slowly. Her skin had lost some of its pale blue frost. She looked tired, but no longer on the edge of death. "Far," she said. Her voice was calm, but her words were broken. "Another star. My people." "Not many left," Jamie nodded, trying to understand. "Why were you out there? In the snow?" Zari glanced down at her sleeping child. "We escaped. From those who destroy. Bad ones took our home. Burned our city, we ran. My pod crashed. I thought—" She paused. "I thought no one would find us." David turned around, walking closer. "You said someone is looking for you." "Who are they?" Zari's hands gripped the blanket. Her face turned serious. "They are hunters. Cold ones. They take what they want. They want my daughter." "Not me." Jamie's eyes widened. "Why?" Zari didn't speak for a moment. Then she pointed at Luma's tiny bracelet. It looked simple, just a band with a soft green glow. But now that David looked at it closely, he saw strange symbols floating across its surface like small waves of energy. "She carries something," Zari whispered. "Something I hid from them inside. Her bracelet holds our future." David didn't ask more. He could tell she was afraid. She had reason to be. He crouched beside the couch and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You're safe now. No one knows you're here." Zari nodded slowly, but her eyes were filled with worry. "They will come. They always do." Later that evening, Jamie brought soup to Zari. She looked at it with curious eyes. She sniffed it, tasted a spoonful, then gave a small smile. "This is good," Jamie grinned. "Dad makes it when I'm sick." "It always helps." Zari held the warm bowl in her hands. For the first time in days, her fingers stopped shaking. Luma stirred beside her. The small alien child opened her eyes. Jamie quickly handed her a cup of warm milk. She stared at him, then slowly took it. Her fingers brushed his. She didn't flinch. Jamie beamed. "Hi, Luma, I'm Jamie." Luma looked at her mother, unsure. Zari nodded. "It's okay. He is friend." Luma sipped the milk and leaned against her mother's side. She was still weak but alive. David watched the moment in silence. His heart felt strange. A warmth that had nothing to do with the fire was growing inside him. Night fell over the cabin. Outside, the wind began to rise again. But the inside was calm. David checked the radio, still no signal. The storm had knocked out the line. He walked to the shelf and took out an old toolbox. "What are you doing, Dad?" Jamie asked. David opened Zari's broken device. Wires, circuits. It was like nothing he had ever seen. But something about it made sense. "I think I can fix this," he said. "If I can power it, maybe it can call someone for help." Zari sat up straighter. "You fix?" David nodded. "I used to be an engineer. Before we came out here." Zari smiled faintly. "You are more than kind," David shrugged. "Just a father trying to do what's right." Hours passed. Jamie helped sort the tools while Zari and Luma rested. Outside, something moved. A shadow near the tree line. 2 glowing red dots. Eyes watching, waiting inside the cabin. No one noticed, but tomorrow, the danger would begin. The sky was still dark when Jamie woke up. The cabin was silent. The fire had turned to glowing embers. His dad was asleep on the floor beside the workbench, tools scattered around him. The strange alien device was open, its glowing pieces humming softly. Zari and Luma were still wrapped in blankets on the couch. Jamie quietly stood up, careful not to make noise. He grabbed his jacket, boots, and gloves. The firewood pile outside was getting low. He didn't want them to wake up cold. "I'll be back soon," he whispered to himself. Opening the front door slowly, he stepped into the cold. Snow crunched under his boots as he walked toward the small woodshed. The trees stood like tall shadows around him. The moon peeked through the clouds, casting a pale light on the snow-covered ground. Jamie bent down and started picking up wood. Then he stopped. He heard something. A soft crunch. Not his steps. Someone else's. He turned around. Nothing. He picked up another piece. Crunch. This time it was closer. Jamie held his breath and stood still. His eyes scanned the trees. Then he saw it. A figure. Tall. Still. Standing between the trees. It was hard to see clearly in the moonlight, but it didn't look human. It had long limbs, a narrow head, and red eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. Jamie dropped the wood. The creature tilted its head. Jamie ran. He ran faster than he ever had, snow flying behind him. His breath came out in clouds. He didn't look back. He reached the cabin, slammed the door, and locked it. David sat up instantly. "Jamie? What's wrong?" Jamie was panting. "There's something out there. I saw it. It was watching me from the trees." Zari stood quickly, holding Luma close. Her eyes were wide. "Did it see you?" Jamie nodded. It had red eyes. David grabbed his flashlight and opened the window, shining it outside. Nothing but trees and snow. No footprints. No movement, but Jamie knew what he saw. "They're here," Zari whispered. "The hunters." David's jaw tightened. He looked at Jamie. "You did good coming back fast." Jamie pointed at the alien device on the table. "Did you fix it?" David shook his head. "Almost. But I need more time." Zari placed her hand on Luma's bracelet. "If they get this, everything is lost." Later that morning, David began setting up defenses. He boarded the windows, reinforced the doors, and set traps around the cabin. He taught Jamie how to lock and unlock the back hatch under the floor, just in case they had to hide. Jamie stayed close to Zari and Luma. He could tell Zari was trying to be strong, but her hand shook when she touched the window. Luma clung to her, her eyes filled with fear. To distract them, Jamie showed Luma his drawings. He drew their cabin, the fireplace, and a picture of Luma smiling. Luma looked at it, then looked at him. "You draw me?" Jamie nodded. "Yeah, you look better when you smile." Luma tried. "Just a little one." But it made Jamie feel warm. By evening, David finally fixed the alien device. It buzzed softly and glowed green. "It's working," he said. "Now we wait." Zari placed her hand over his. "Thank you." David looked at her, confused. "You trust me? Just like that?" She nodded. "You helped without asking. You gave without wanting," Jamie added. "You're part of our family now." Zari's eyes softened. "Then I will protect this family too." Night returned. Jamie couldn't sleep. He stared out the window, watching snow fall slowly. Then he saw it, a second figure, walking across the field, and another one, right behind it, red eyes glowing in the dark. They were coming. Jamie pressed his face to the cold window glass. Snow fell in small, quiet flakes now, but the world outside still felt sharp and dangerous. Two shapes moved at the edge of the trees. Slow. Careful. Their red eyes glowed like coals under a lid. "Dad?" Jamie whispered. "They're here." David stepped beside him and looked through the crack in the boarded window. He saw nothing at first, then a flicker. Metal on a shoulder, the bend of a long knee, the outline of a narrow head. "I see them," he said. His voice was calm, but his jaw tightened. Zari pulled Luma closer. The child's bracelet gave off a soft green pulse, then dimmed again. Zari noticed the pulse and covered the band with a cloth. "They can sniff energy," she said softly. "We must be careful," David nodded. "Then we keep the beacon asleep unless we need it." He turned a small dial on the alien device, lowering its hum until it was a whisper. He moved around the cabin, checking each defense. A heavy bar locked across the front door. Nails and wire formed a simple tripline near the back porch. Two old bells hung on strings at the eaves. A small shake would ring them like a warning. Not perfect, but better than nothing. "Jamie," he said. "Remember the trapdoor?" Jamie lifted the braided rug and showed the metal ring hidden in the floor. "I remember. If I tell you to hide, you take Luma and go down. Zari will go after you. You close it and stay quiet. No matter what you hear," Jamie swallowed. "What about you?" "I'll be right here," David said. "But I need room to move." Jamie nodded, even though he didn't like it. A soft clicking sound came from outside. Not wind, not snow. Click, pause, click, like tiny stones tapping glass. Zari stiffened. "They talk like that," she whispered. Short clicks. Short words. Fast orders. David lifted a curtain edge and peeked again. One hunter crouched by a pine trunk, holding a thin rod that pointed at the cabin. The other swept a hand-sized disc low over the snow. The disc floated and spun, then flashed a red dot that blinked in a slow circle. "Tracking. They're searching for a heat trail," David said. "Or a signal." Zari's fingers squeezed Luma's shoulder. "They want the band." Jamie looked at the bracelet. "Why, what's inside?" Zari kept her voice low and even. A map, not of places but of living things. Seeds, songs, codes, and light. It is a pattern to rebuild what we lost. Sky farms, water shields, clean fire. My people called it a memory spring. The hunters sell such things, or break them so others must buy fuel and chains. Jamie's eyes grew wide. He looked at Luma with new respect. So, she's carrying hope. Zari nodded. Only a child can open it. The key is heartbeat and trust. David set his hand on the table, saw he had dragged near the door. Not to cut, but to brace the entrance. Then we keep that heartbeat safe, he said. The bells did not ring. The tripwire did not move, but the cabin air grew tight, the way a room feels just before lightning. A small drone, thin as a plate, slid along the porch rail like a dark fish in water. It drifted to the window. Its lens tasted the glass. A faint line began to form, a circle etched by heat. David's eyes snapped to it. Down, he said. Now Jamie grabbed Luma's hand. Come with me, he whispered. He lifted the rug, pulled the ring, and raised the trap door. Cool air breathed from the dark below. A short ladder waited. I go first, Jamie said. Then Luma, then you, Zari. Zari looked to David. He kept his eyes on the drone. Go, he said. I'm right here. Jamie climbed down, his boots touching the hard-packed earth beneath the cabin. He held Luma's waist and lowered her. Zari followed, one hand still on the floor edge, unwilling to disappear until she had to. The drone finished its circle. The glass inside that circle softened and sagged like a wet coin. A thin claw slid in and lifted the cut disc away. Cold air seeped into the room. David raised his old shotgun and aimed at the circle. A red eye filled the hole. He fired once. The window exploded outward, snow and glass whipping across the porch. The drone dropped like a dead moth, lights dying in its shell. The blast shook the bowls on the shelf. Luma cried out below. Jamie covered her ears. From the trees came more clicks, fast, angry. Then a loud, flat voice spoke in broken human words. Shelter owner, it called. Help us. We are lost in storm. Jamie looked up at the trapdoor opening, eyes big. They can talk like us? Zari whispered from the dark. They learned some words. They wear friendly voices like masks. David stepped sideways from the window and kept low. Stay down, he told Zari. Don't answer, the voice came again, closer. Please, cold, we need warm, we are... Hikers, boots pressed snow. Boards creaked on the porch. A shadow crossed the fogged glass by the door. A pale hand, too long in the fingers, tapped the wood. Tap, 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 open, the voice said, softer now. We bring no harm. David slid a bar deeper into its cradle. He checked the second shell. He checked his breath. Through the trapdoor gap, Jamie could see his father's boots. He could hear his father's heart in the quiet moments between the wind. Another tap at the door. Then a second voice, lower, with a hiss hiding behind the words. We know you have them. Silence poured into the room like water. The fire crackled once, then held its tongue. The first voice tried gentle again. We saw tracks. We want to help the small one. She is lost. She is special. Zari shut her eyes and held Luma tight. The bracelet throbbed once under the cloth as if afraid. David did not move. He aimed at the space where a head would be if the door opened. Snow sifted from the roof. The porch board sighed. The handle turned. Very slowly. A soft metal tongue testing the latch. Please, the voice said, only inches away now. Let us in. The latch clicked. The bells above the porch began to ring. The bells rang sharp and bright, like tiny alarms shaking the cold air. The latch turned again. David pressed his shoulder into the door and held his breath. For a heartbeat, everything paused. The wind, the fire, even the hunters outside. Then the knock changed. It wasn't gentle anymore. It was hard. Boom! Boom! Wood groaned. Back, David said quietly. Under the floor, Jamie squeezed Luma's hand. He could see a slice of the room through the small gap of the trapdoor. He saw his father raise the shotgun. He saw the door bend in the middle like a bow. Another boom. The top hinge creaked. A thin crack opened near the handle and a long gray tool slid in, trying to lift the bar. David moved fast. He drove a screwdriver into the gap and hammered it with his fist. The tool snapped with a ping. The bar stayed in place. From the porch came the click language again. Short, angry orders. The hunters were not pretending anymore. A soft scraping sound whispered along the outside wall. Something crawled toward the back window. David rushed to the kitchen, kicked a stool under the frame, and yanked the curtain. A small eel-like drone slid across the glass, its tip glowing hot, drawing a thin line. "Not again," he muttered. He grabbed the iron poker from the fire, opened the window lock a crack, and stabbed through the gap. The drone jolted and spun away, smoking. The front door boomed harder now. Dust fell from the ceiling. Zari, still half inside the trap, looked up with wide eyes. "They will break through," she said. David nodded once. His face was set. "Then we'll make them regret it." He ran to the workbench and pulled a coil of wire, a small 12-volt battery, and a jar of nails. He moved like a man who had practiced for storms and wolves and long nights alone. He stretched the wire across the entry, knee-high, and tied small bells to it. Then he scattered nails across the floor just beyond the threshold and poured cooking oil over the boards. Zari watched, surprised. "You plan like a hunter. I plan like a dad," David said. "That's stronger," the doorframe screamed. Wood split. The top hinge popped free. A black finger slid through the crack and found the inside handle. The bells shook again. "Ready," David breathed. The door burst inward. Two tall shapes filled the frame, heads low, arms long, red eyes glinting. The first one stepped and hit the wire. Bells sang. Its foot slid on the oil, skated forward, and landed on nails. It hissed and stumbled. The second tried to push past, slipped too, and struck the first. Both went down in a tangle, claws scraping wood. David fired once into the ceiling beam above them. The blast threw splinters and noise into their faces. The hunters flinched and covered their eyes from the shower of dust and firelight. David used the moment to slam a heavy shelf forward. It crashed into their backs and pinned them halfway in the doorway. The first hunter twisted, fast and snake-like, and swung a baton that sparked blue. It hit the shelf and burned a smoking line through the wood. The smell was bitter and hot. David fell back behind the table saw barrier.
"Stay down,"
he yelled. Below, Jamie held Luma and looked at Zari. "We can't just sit," he whispered. "What can I do?" Zari pointed to a small hatch under the floor that led to the crawl space by the back porch. "There is an outside vent. If you crawl to it, you can pull the wire on the back trip. It will drop the wood stack I set there earlier." Jamie nodded. "I can do that." He handed Luma to Zari and slid into the crawl space, moving on elbows and knees, careful and quiet. He felt cold dirt on his cheeks, heard the thumps above, smelled oil and smoke. Upstairs, the second hunter wriggled free and rose to a crouch. It spoke human words again, but without the fake kindness. "Give, child," it said, flat and hard. "Now." David didn't answer. He grabbed the iron poker and swung at the hunter's knee. The hit landed. The creature grunted and stepped back, right into the nails again. It stumbled, caught the table saw with one hand, and ripped the handle off like paper. The first hunter was free now. It aimed a palm at the room. A cone of cold burst forward. The fire hissed and shrank. Frost raced across the floorboards, turning the spilled oil into a glassy sheet. David's breath smoked. He slipped on the ice, hit the floor, and slid into the wall. The shotgun skidded away. The hunter advanced, slow and sure. Under the house, Jamie reached the vent. He found the loop of wire Zari had tied there and took a breath. "Now," Zari whispered above. Voice tight. Jamie pulled the wire hard. Outside, the rope snapped free and a stacked column of split logs, set upright beside the porch roof, toppled like a slow wave. The heavy wood slid down the roof and thundered onto the porch with a crash, smashing drones, cracking railing, and slamming the doorway beam sideways. The impact jolted the hunters. One fell to a knee. The other threw up an arm to shield its face. Bells rang and kept ringing. David grabbed the shotgun, rolled to one side, and fired low into the ice just ahead of the nearest hunter. Splinters and shards burst upward like sharp rain. The hunter jerked back, footing lost, arms pinwheeling. Zari climbed out of the trap in one motion, eyes bright with a kind of steady fire. She held the broken alien device David had repaired and twisted a dial he had not touched. "Shield," she said, a soft dome of faint light spread from the device and settled over the couch and the trapdoor, thin as mist, but humming with strength. Luma's bracelet answered with a single green pulse. The nearest hunter snarled and swung the blue baton at the dome. The baton struck and bounced. The light wavered but held. From the trees came a new sound. Heavy steps, more than two, breaking branches. "Others," Zari breathed. They called for help. David pushed himself to one knee. His face was pale, but his eyes were steady. How long can that shield hold? he asked. Zari shook her head. Not long. Minutes. David glanced at the beacon on the workbench, the one he had almost finished, the one he had kept sleeping to hide its signal. What if we wake it now? He said. Zari met his eyes. She understood the risk. If they woke it, friends might hear, but so would enemies. Luma, small and brave, touched her bracelet through the cloth. I can try, she whispered. The doorframe sagged again under the weight of new steps. More red eyes appeared in the dark beyond the porch. David's hand hovered over the beacon switch. Do it, he said. Zari nodded once. Jamie crawled back up through the trap, breath white, eyes bright. He reached Zari's side and took Luma's hand. Together, mother and child pressed the bracelet against the beacon's core. The cabin filled with a low, rising tone like a song from deep water. Outside, every red eye turned toward the sound. The beacon woke. The beacon's song grew stronger, deep, clear, and brave. It filled the cabin like a heartbeat. The red eyes outside turned as one, focusing on the sound. Snow drifted in slow circles through the broken window. The wind went thin and sharp. Hold the dome, David said. Zari's fingers trembled on the dial. The small shield hummed and shook like a soap bubble in a storm. Luma pressed her bracelet close to the beacon's core. The green glow brightened, then wavered. Jamie stood between the couch and the workbench, eyes fixed on the doorway. Dad, more are coming. He was right. The porch groaned under heavy steps. Shadows stacked against the frame. A hunter pushed the broken door wide with a hiss and raised a pale hand. Its palm opened like a metal flower. Frost rolled across the floor again, crawling up chair legs and the table's edge. David moved before the cold could bite deeper. He slid to the side, grabbed the iron poker, and smashed the hunter's wrist. The metal flower snapped shut. The creature recoiled with a hiss, red eyes bright and hateful. Another hunter stepped in low. It swung its blue baton. David blocked with the poker, sparks jumping where the metal met. The hit shook his arm to the shoulder. He bit down on pain and drove his boot into the hunter's knee. It fell sideways into the oil-slick ice and crashed hard. Back! The first one barked in the click language, then in rough human words. Take the child. Break the man. Jamie's breath came fast. He reached for another trick. Zari, can I move the lanterns? Yes, put them low, she said. Near the oil. He slid the 2 lanterns to the edge of the spill and set them on their sides, flame small but waiting. The hunter with the baton rose again and came straight for the dome. It struck the light shield once, twice. The shell rippled and dimmed like thin glass under rain. It's failing, Zari said, voice tight. David stepped in front of them, shoulders square. Then they fight me first. He lifted the shotgun. It was a heavy thing in his hands, old but honest. He fired at the ceiling beam again, just above the hunter's head. Wood burst, dust and splinters raining down. The creature flinched and covered its eyes. David charged, slammed his shoulder into its chest and drove it back into the doorframe. Another dark shape slid in from the right, silent, quick, a knife flashing in its hand. It leaped at David's side. He turned too late. The blade raked across his upper arm. Heat and cold hit him at the same time. Dad! Jamie cried. David stumbled, caught himself and shoved the attacker away with the butt of the gun. The wound burned. Blood soaked his sleeve and ran to his glove. His fingers felt slow, but he kept the weapon up. Zari's lips pressed into a hard line. She twisted the device dial again. The dome narrowed, smaller, denser, hugging the couch and the trapdoor like a shell. Jamie, inside, she said. Jamie shook his head. Not without Dad. David didn't look back. Listen to her, he said, steady. Protect Luma. Jamie swallowed, then crouched behind the dome, one hand on Luma's shoulder, the other gripping the toolbox like a shield. The first hunter stepped through the splinters and pointed a flat disc. It snapped open. A net of cold blue light shot forward and wrapped David from chest to knees. He fell to one knee. The net hummed and squeezed like ice snakes. He tried to rise and the mesh tightened. The baton hunter advanced, raising its weapon for the final strike. David did not panic. He looked past the blade to the lanterns on their sides sitting in the thin oil river. Jamie, he said softly, almost a whisper. Spark. The boy understood. He grabbed the steel striker from the toolbox, scraped it hard against the iron file and flicked a spray of bright sparks toward the lantern's mouth. One spark landed. The small flame jumped, found the oil, and ran with it like a fox unleashed. Fire licked across the floor in a fast, low wave. The nearest hunter jerked back, cloak catching a curl of flame. It swatted its arm, hissed, slipped again on the icy oil, and crashed into its partner. The blue baton fell and skittered under the table. Heat rose, frost shattered. Steam roared where fire met ice. David forced himself to stand against the net. He planted his boots, pulled his arms wide, and ripped the mesh against the door's broken nail heads. The net tore with a sharp metallic scream. He staggered free, grabbed the fallen baton, and swung it with both hands. Its edge struck the metal disc thrower and broke it in half. "Move!" he barked, voice iron now. "Out!" The two hunters scrambled back onto the porch, flames chasing their heels. Others pulled them away with harsh clicks. Smoke curled along the ceiling, then drifted out into the night air as wind sucked it through the shattered window. Zari knelt by David and pressed fabric to his arm. Luma reached out a small hand and touched his wrist. Her bracelet glowed soft and green. The bleeding slowed. David's breathing steadied. "You stood like a wall," Zari said. He smiled with one corner of his mouth. "That's my job." Outside, the clicks changed rhythm. Not a retreat, a regroup. More shadows gathered among the trees, 4, then 6, then 8. A taller shape rose behind them, like a tower on thin legs. Its head opened into a crown of instruments. It began to sing a cold, thin note that cut through the storm. "Their relay," Zari whispered. "They will jam our call." The beacon on the table answered with its own song, stronger now, brighter, filling the cabin with a low silver tone. Luma's bracelet flashed twice, then settled to a clear, steady glow. Jamie pointed at the window. "Look." Far above the black trees, the clouds thinned. Between them, a narrow path opened into the sky. Something moved there, far away but coming fast. Not a star, not a plane. A shape like a sharp leaf of light, silent and bright. The tall relay outside screamed louder. The hunters raised their faces, red eyes small under the glare. The beacon sang back as if happy to hear a friend. David stood, swayed once, and steadied. He picked up the shotgun again, then handed it to Jamie. "Hold this," he said. "You earned it." Jamie held the weapon, hands firm, face set. He looked small behind it, but his eyes were brave. Zari turned the dome outward, thinning it to a veil across the doorway. "1 more minute," she said. "Maybe 2. The leaf of light in the clouds grew larger, cutting a clean line through wind and snow. The hunters shuffled, uncertain for the first time. David took a breath that tasted like smoke and winter and hope. "Come on," he murmured to the sky. "Come fast." The cabin walls hummed with the beacon's music. Outside, the red eyes dimmed and turned. Above, a white spear of light fell through the clouds. The white spear of light cut through the clouds and came down toward the forest. Snowflakes turned bright in its path and fell like silver dust. The hunters stepped back, their red eyes shrinking. Their tall relay sang a cold scream, but the sound shook and fell flat. Inside the cabin, the shield around the couch flickered. Zari held the small device tight. Luma kept her bracelet near the beacon. Jamie stood ready with the shotgun. David stood beside him, one hand on the boy's shoulder, blood dark on his sleeve, but his eyes steady and calm. The spear of light slowed and changed shape. It became a ship, long, white, and smooth, with soft blue lines running along its sides. It hovered above the trees, silent and sure. The air trembled gently. Snow on the branches jumped and slid to the ground in soft waves. A clear voice spoke from the ship. It was not loud, but it carried strength. It spoke in Zari's language first, then in clean, simple human words. "Step back from the shelter. Leave now. You are outnumbered." The hunters froze. Their relay stuttered. One tried to raise its baton again, but a thin beam of blue from the ship brushed the baton and it fell to the snow like a dead stick. Another hunter reached for a disc, and the ship's light touched the disc too. It broke with a small pop. The hunters looked at each other. For the first time, they looked afraid. The ship lowered a little more. A door opened underneath. A narrow ramp of light dropped to the ground in front of the cabin's broken porch. Warm air flowed from the door. It smelled like clean rain after a long summer day. 2 figures walked down the ramp. They were tall and graceful, wearing soft gray suits with gentle blue threads. Their eyes shone like deep water under the moon. They carried no guns. They carried long, thin rods that glowed at the ends. Zari exhaled. "Our kin," she whispered. The 2 allies stopped a few steps from the porch. One raised the glowing rod. A wide wall of light unfolded, slow and quiet, between the cabin and the hunters. It was like the shield Zari had made, but broader, stronger, calm as a sunrise. The hunters hissed. They clicked orders. Then, as the ship's shadow settled over the snow, they turned and ran into the trees. Their feet snapped branches and crushed dry brush. In moments, the red eyes were gone. The tall relay shut itself and folded like a cold flower. Its glow died. Snow covered it fast. Silence came back to the forest. The two allies stepped onto the porch, moved the broken shelf aside with easy hands, and entered the cabin. They bowed their heads to David and Jamie first, then to Zari and Luma behind the fading dome. "Home, Seer Zari," said the one in front. "We heard your call. The memory spring is safe with the child?" Zari nodded and pulled the cloth from Luma's bracelet. The soft green light pulsed steady. "It is safe," she said. "Thanks to them." The allies' eyes went to David and Jamie again. "You stood in winter against hired cold," the ally said. "We owe you more than words," David shook his head. "You don't owe us. Any father would do the same." The ally smiled, a quiet, kind smile. "Many say that. Few prove it." Zari turned to David, then to Jamie. Her voice trembled, but it was gentle. "You gave us fire and blankets and courage. You gave us time. You gave us hope. We cannot stay, but we will not forget." Luma let go of her mother's hand and stepped toward Jamie. She reached into a small pocket on her belt and pulled out a tiny, clear cube. Inside the cube, a soft pattern moved like a slow snowstorm. Dots and lines, faint and beautiful. "For you," she said. "A friend gift." Jamie took the cube carefully. "What is it?" "Memory light," Luma said. "It holds songs. When you are sad, hold it. It will show you a sky you do not know yet." Jamie smiled and his eyes shone. "Thank you." The second ally knelt by David's arm and touched the wound with the glowing rod. Warmth spread through the cut. The pain eased and the bleeding stopped. A thin, bright line crossed the skin, then faded to a faint mark. "It will heal clean," the ally said. "You will feel strong by morning." David flexed his fingers and nodded. "Feels like a new arm," he said. The first ally walked to the broken window and looked out at the ship. Then the ally turned back and held out a small metal card to David. It was smooth with a circle on one side and a line of simple shapes. "If you ever need help," the ally said, "press the circle and say your name. If we are near the sky above you, we will come." David took the card slowly, like a man holding a promise. "I hope I do not need it," he said. "But thank you." Zari stood, picked up her small device, and gave it back to David. "Keep this," she said. "It is broken now, but your hands understand it. One day it may teach you something." David smiled. "I will keep it safe." Luma looked at Jamie again. "Can I hug you?" Jamie nodded fast. They hugged. It was a small hug, child to child, but it felt like a bridge across the cold night. Zari stepped forward and hugged David too, careful and soft. "Goodbye, brave father," she whispered. "Goodbye, brave son." They walked to the light ramp with the two allies. At the door, Zari paused and looked back at the cabin. The firelight, the tools, the little drawings on the table, the old wood that had stood strong in a hard storm. "We will return," she said. "When our world is safe and your sky is clear, we will come share a warm day." The ramp drew them up. The door closed like a gentle blink. The ship rose, quiet and bright, and turned toward the open path in the clouds. It moved faster and faster until it was only a white line across the night. Then even that line was gone. Snow fell again, soft and slow. David and Jamie stood in the doorway and watched the sky for a long time. The wind did not feel so sharp now. The forest did not feel so dark. Jamie opened his hand and looked at the little cube. A soft light flowed inside it. He held it to his ear and he heard a tiny, beautiful sound like a song with no words. "It sounds like the inside of a star," he said. David rested a hand on his shoulder. "Maybe that's what hope sounds like." They went back inside and added logs to the fire. Warmth spread through the cabin. The broken door could be fixed. The window could be patched. The night was still cold, but their hearts were not. David looked at the metal card in his hand, then placed it on the shelf beside the lantern. "We did something good," he said. Jamie nodded. "We saved a world, Dad." David smiled at his son, the small hero who ran through snow, who lit a fire with sparks, who held another child's hand in the dark. "Yes," he said softly. "We did." Outside, the last flakes drifted down. Inside, the fire glowed steady and kind. And far above the quiet forest, somewhere beyond the clouds, a white ship carried a mother and a child toward the dawn.